Iraq is, I'm sure you all know that it was invaded in 2003. And the invasion being, the impact of the invasion being on every aspect of daily lives. It might take me hours to explain every single details, but I'm only going to highlight a few of the aspects, whether political, the economy. I'll talk a bit about human rights because this is also the aspect which I am more related to at the moment, and I'm working in that. There will be about women and the issue of how women political participation taking place as well. Politically, the regime ruling Iraq in 2011, we witnessed the formal end of the military occupation, the direct military occupation. At the moment, we have it indirectly. And this suddenly, I mean, what we've seen in the streets of Baghdad and the rest of the cities in Iraq as military forces with their high-tech weaponry, frightening and terrorizing everybody, they changed suddenly into wearing nice suits. And they became, instead of commanders and soldiers and special forces and all that, they became suddenly consultants, advisors, trainees, and you can see them in every ministry and institute working, and committees, committees being established to oversee everything, whether it's politics, whether it's economy, whether it's education, cultural aspects. So these committees, joint committees they call them, as if on equal ground, they are everywhere and they are controlling the country at large. These are part of the agreement which was signed by the Bush administration in 2008-2009 and carried on by the Obama administration and the Iraqi regime. The agreement called the strategic, long-term strategic agreement. And it really, if you read all the details, articles of this agreement, it controls everything. Especially, I mean, they pay a lot of attention to the cultural, education, civil society, in addition to the main, what you suspect usually of military occupation in general. So the regime at the moment is an Iraqi in appearances. We have Iraqi government, but this Iraqi government, in addition to the behind the facade of it, the presence of the American in the form of the biggest embassy in the world. We have 5,000 people working in that embassy, mostly CIA people and the special tasks, they call them, special forces. And they have am I doing that? Why is this happening? Just try now? Yeah. So it's, is it better? Can you hear?
Just put this cover onto it.
Okay. This should be good. Is that better?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. We don't want to lose our here as well. So those in the embassy, and also they created for us disputed areas. So many of now the lines or the cities up in the north, like the city of the oil, Kirkuk, is a disputed city, disputed area now. And along the line near Mosul in the north as well, and many of the villages, they all disputed areas, and we have points of control by the Americans on these. The claim is to protect the population, protect Iraqis from themselves. because it seems like since thousands of years, Iraqis are used to kill each other. So they were waiting for the Americans to come and protect them this way. Another form of protection for Iraqis being created is the checkpoints. So in Baghdad alone, there are 1,400 checkpoints now. That means is if I wanted to move for 100 meters, or almost every 100 meters, I have to go through checkpoints. The checkpoints are controlled by sometimes teenagers carrying machine guns, sectarian, arrogant, but they are, the claim also, they are there to protect you. Mostly, I mean, women and men, they can be humiliated at these checkpoints because it's up to the mood. If it's too hot, the soldier or the security force might not like your shape, might not like your religion, the way you speak, you'll be humiliated. So the choice that many people are taking nowadays is not to leave their houses. Unless it is out of necessity, you have to go to work or something else or urgent, you stay at home. And you want to be humiliated. You don't want also to respond with violence because you'll be killed. There's no point of doing that. So they are using kind of hand gadget. They paid millions of dollars to buy those hand gadgets in order to detect weapons, to detect any kind of terrorist machinery or something. But it transpires after signing this huge contracts of multi-millions is the only detection this tool, the hand gadget, is doing is gives you a sound only when there is a lipstick. So women are not allowed to carrying lipsticks or using lipsticks or anything. It goes absolutely berserk and you'll be body searched and humiliated and everything. This is part of it. And by the way, the man who sold these, he'd been on a trial in London and he was sentenced to many years because the fraud of it, but the money went and it disappeared from the pocket. This regime is based on sectarianism. That's why you hear a lot in the news about Sunni Shia divide, about Sunnis killing Shias, the Shiite killing Sunnis, and the attacks on crowded places, markets, and mosques, Husseinias. Everywhere there are cafes are targeted hugely. Obviously, the reason behind that, first of all, is to control certain areas. Because in addition to the checkpoints, we have Baghdad now divided to 50 areas. The 50 areas divided by concrete walls. It's like in Palestine, this apartheid wall. It's like 2 to 3 meters high concrete, solid concrete. And these concrete, by the way, they've been brought from Israel. So as if they managed and succeeded in doing what they did in Israel, they are importing the experience into Iraq. There are 2 points to get into your own area. Suppose you want to come to the campus. So there is entry point and exit point. In both, again, you have the checkpoints with all the trouble and dogs. Dogs will climb on you. This is an American introduction or way of civilization to the Iraqis, is the huge dogs, which we're paying now millions also to get them. So it's part of the Iraqi budget now to buy American dogs to protect ourselves. So all these supposedly to protect Iraqis. In fact, they are to control Iraqis. It's much easier if you are in one area, in one zone, and so in and out, you are controlled. It is also to stop Iraqis to be with others, communicating on a daily level. Because if you're worried about going out, you have less contact with the outside, with your neighbors, less contact with other people, going and coming, buying and shopping. So there is growth now of local shops only within those enclosures. So in fact, I mean, communities are walled in. The segregation is huge. So what started as an idea, just an idea that Iraq is the component of the Iraqi people are Shiite and Sunnis, it's gradually becoming a factual thing on the ground, because it is, they slowly, it's being implemented there. So we don't go to different areas, it's becoming the other. So people we've been living with over thousands of years, we've been together. Now we become an us and them. The others are there because they are behind the wall and we are frightening of them. We don't know what's going to happen. They are the source of terror and terrorism. And this machinery of propaganda, of psychology, it's working day and night on Iraqi channels. There are hundreds of sectarian Iraqi TV channels working on that. Hundreds of newspapers got funded by the various political parties working on that, the media, the TV, everything that can reach you in home while you are enclosed within these walls. It is delivering this message of you and the other and the fear. So the fear is there now and it's becoming a reality among the people themselves. This is a general thing about sectarianism, and it's corruption is part also of sectarianism, because most of those political parties now part of this new regime are baseless. They mushroomed, most of them, immediately after the occupation, and being baseless in society, they had to find a way of establishing themselves in order to say, well, look, we represent this. So they're playing on sectarianism and using corruption. The money is there. And Iraq is very, very rich. Rich in a way that it's the second country with the reserve of oil in the world. The budget, in fact, of this year, 128 billion, is the highest in the history of Iraq. And it is equal to the budget of 4 neighboring countries put together. Yet Iraqi population are less treated as human beings and deprived of basic needs and services than the other neighboring countries. So money is available like you can carry in sacks and walk, gold, not just paper money. And that's what the Americans did. They moved it in sacks and moved it in millions and billions. In fact, the Transparency, International Transparency Organization, in a recent report, they mentioned that the amount of money moving out of Iraq unlawfully every month is $800 million. It's actually every week, $800 million. It's leaving it, and no one knows. In comparison, we have our children attending schools, mud schools made of mud, and they have to level like three times divided per day. Each group of children, in their hundreds, they attend like for a couple of hours, they leave, other group coming, and they leave another group. So the education is at its lowest level. According to Oxfam report, a year ago, 92% of Iraqi children are suffering from learning impediment. This is, some of them are traumatized because of the wars, of poverty, of deprived of security, of feeling of safety as well. Because every day if a child will go to school, you don't know whether you'll see the child or not. The husband, when they go to work, you don't know if you see them or not. My sister-in-law, she got a mobile, and she keeps like saying, well, I said, what do you need it for? All your friends left Iraq. And the only function for mobiles now is to make sure your loved ones are still alive and haven't been blown up somewhere. Because there are average 12 car bombs or deadly explosions every day in Baghdad alone. And last month, October, was the figure given is 1,670 Iraqis were killed and wounded. Wounded meaning they'll die later. This is the right figure for it. It's because wounded, you don't have the health service, the health care, so forget about it. You are dead. This is the general atmosphere. Obviously, I mean, sectarianism means also ministries being divided among Shia, Sunnis, Kurds, Turkoman, everything. There is a ministry of this thing. If you have something to deal in any of those ministries, you better be, if it's a Shia, you better have an ID which proves you are a Sunni. Or a Shia belonging to that sect, so you have your papers to be processed. Otherwise, forget it, you just clear out. So it's becoming like it's the system which is the controlling the country next to the corruption. And corruption is actually, this whole functioning is consumed by it, starting from the smallest, the lowest level of the government to the highest. The highest, they deal with oil. The highest rank, with weaponry, with weapons, the corruption there. The lower you go, you deal with detainees, because the problem of detainees also is related to corruption. If a woman goes to a prison looking for her husband, she will be asked about two things. First, money. She has to pay money. Second, if she hasn't got the money, sexual favors in return for information about her loved one detained. And she has to pay for that. In most cases, even if she pays in money, she has to submit for the second one, because they say, well, no, we don't do this, we don't do that. And it's a business. Every single officer in the army, in the security, in the thing, there are levels of the corruption moving on. To visit a detainee, you have to pay. To get a phone call, you have to pay. To pass them a message, you have to pay. And I've been personally through all this process, and I can tell you all the details until this. But I dealt with many cases about detainees, how to reach them with Amnesty International, with Human Rights Watch, and we've seen it all. In some cases, it became very difficult for people asking for outside help, because in that case, they think, well, Amnesty International dealing with the case, so they'll stop taking money from you. But on the other hand, they'll punish the detainee. So it will be a curse rather than a help in that case. We're very sensitive how to deal with these issues, what to do with this corrupt place in general. This is, it's politics, it's the economy, it's education deterioration. Women have rearranged their priorities since 2003. That doesn't mean they were in a fantastic situation before the invasion, because we had a couple of wars. I mean, the Iraq-Iran war, 8 years of, and it's considered the longest war since the Second World War, I think, in an area, a major war. And we lost many of men and women there. But at that time, women became, because of the need, because most of the men were at the front, women became the substitute to run the country. So they became almost like, described the regime at then like a feminist regime. It wasn't actually. I mean, it was the need, the economy, and the need for women to do the jobs then. But sanction years, really, we say in Arabic, broke our hearts, our backs. 13 years of sanctions devastated everything, devastated all things. Many women left their jobs because it's not worth going to work for payment that you can hardly pay your transport to work. So they left. Men started to do 3 or 4 jobs at the same time. This is a country that in the 70s, the Iraqi dinar used to be equal to 2 British pounds sterlings. It became to be equal, I mean, each pound now and then 2,500 Iraqi dinar. So it's the economy turned upside down, and yet women really managed, being resilient. They started what's called cottage economy industry, or cottage. They work from home, producing things, trying to support their families. Especially we left now with a large number of widows and a large number of families with missing people. The missing people, we don't know what's happened to them. But after the occupation, we have a figure, and that's based on the International Red Cross. Up to 2003, we had 375,000 missing persons. That's from the previous regime, politically, the wars, the bombardment continuous, the DU using of the depleted, whatever. But those are the missing people. From 2003 to 2008, the figure reached 1 million. That is due to the invasion. The bombardment again, the killing, the terrorist acts, whoever is committing them, and there are very disputed theories about this and controversials and everything. And if there will be time, we can talk about who is doing this on what and why later. But the general picture and we are left with 1 million widows. Average Iraqi family, 5 kids, so you have at lowest approximate is 5 million orphans in need of support, in need of. Women are becoming more and more the head of the household, to look after kids, find a job, and everything. So what are the solutions as being presented by the Iraqi regime at the moment and the political parties involved in what's called the democratic political process? 2 solutions they came up with. Actually 3. One of them came by the Islamic Party, and the Islamic Party is the Sunni party. That's encouraging, paying men to marry more women. So polygamy. This is something was almost illegal by Iraqi law. There are exceptions, 2 exceptions only, when a man is allowed to marry again for the second time if the wife is still alive. 1, if she is terminally ill. 2nd, if she hasn't got children and he has to prove it, they have to prove it, and then only can get married for the second time if the wife approves. So it's very, very limited scope of what you can do. Now they are encouraged, and there are prices paid. If you are paying for a wife with children, there is money to pay, like $2,000. If it's only on her own, it's $1,000. So this is one of the very fantastic political program of the Islamic Party. The second solution provided by the other sect, which is the Shia sect. And this is, we've witnessed a practice quite familiar, and it's been established for a long time in Iran. And this is called al-mut'a zawaj. It's the temporary wedding. This is kind of, you have a cleric there or a religious figure sitting. You go to the religious places, and in the presence of this religious figure, a man will pay a certain amount of money, and the cleric will say, I declare you husband and wife. In exchange, this contract of this money paid, and this could last from 10 minutes to 100 years or whatever. But there is nothing written, no guarantee whatsoever in case you have a child, that's finished, all of it. So what we call this is a religious prostitution. That we did not have in Iraq before the invasion. And this is not an Islamic, practice, but a pre-Islamic practice. But it's encouraged, even in Iran, when it became kind of widespread, was during the Iran-Iraq war and the because of so many men killed. It was kind of solution, but also they regulated it by laws. And Iraq has nothing what to do.